Long ago, in a quiet green village surrounded by tall trees and singing birds, there lived a poor but happy family. Their house was small and made of wood and mud, but inside there was laughter, prayer, and peace. Every Sunday morning, the family walked together to the small old church on the hill. The father carried his Bible. The mother held a small candle, and behind them walked their twins, a boy and a girl, hand in hand. Their names were Daniel and Miriam. They looked so much alike that even their mother sometimes smiled and said, "God painted you with the same heart." They both had warm brown eyes, gentle smiles, and a kindness that made people love them. The family had very little money, but their faith was strong. Their father often said, "Children, gold will shine for a moment, but faith shines forever." The twins grew up helping their parents, working in the fields, feeding the animals, and reading the Bible together at night. They prayed before sleeping and thanked God for everything they had. Even though their clothes were old and their shoes torn, their hearts were full of joy. Daniel was clever and quick to learn. He loved reading, counting, and fixing things. Miriam was kind and gentle, always helping others and dreaming about learning too. They studied together under the tree outside their home. One evening, when the stars were shining above the village, Miriam said softly, "Brother, I wish I could go to school like you. I want to learn and help people too." Daniel looked at her and smiled kindly. "If I learn, I will teach you everything I know, Miriam. We are twins. What I learn, you will know too." But in those old times, only boys were allowed to go to school and university. Girls had to stay home, cook, and care for the family. So when Daniel finished his studies, the teacher came one morning with good news. He said with pride, "Daniel, you have been chosen to study at the Royal Christian University. Your grades are the best in the whole region. The king's scholars will pay for you to study there." The family was full of joy. Their father cried, "Thank you, Lord, for blessing my son." The villagers clapped and sang hymns for Daniel. But that night, Miriam sat alone under the moonlight. She smiled, but tears fell down her cheeks. She whispered to the sky, "God, you made us the same. We share the same face, the same heart, but only he gets to learn. Why, Lord?" The next morning, she hugged her brother tightly before he left. She said, "Study hard, Daniel. Do it for both of us." He smiled and promised, "I will." She waved until she could no longer see him. Then she fell to her knees and prayed, "Lord, let his light never fade, and if you ever give me a chance, I will follow your path too." Weeks passed after Daniel left for the city. Every day Miriam prayed for him. She imagined her brother walking through big gates, holding books and learning new things. Her heart was full of love and hope. But one morning a letter came. Her father read it aloud and his voice began to shake. "Daniel is very sick. He can't continue his studies." The mother cried and held the letter close to her heart. Miriam felt her knees go weak. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat outside watching the stars. She whispered, "Lord, Daniel's dream was also mine. He wanted to learn for you, not for himself. Please, if he cannot go on, let me continue his path." As the wind blew softly, she felt peace inside her heart, as if God was speaking through the night. "My child, if your heart is pure, I will walk with you." The next morning, before the sun rose, Miriam made a brave decision. She cut her long hair short, wore Daniel's old clothes, and looked in the mirror. She almost couldn't believe it. She looked exactly like her brother. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Maybe God made us twins for this reason." She packed a small bag, a piece of bread, her brother's papers, and her mother's Bible. She looked at her sleeping parents one last time and whispered, "Forgive me, Lord, but I must go. I will not go to dishonor you. I go to serve you." The road to the city was long and cold. Her feet hurt and her stomach was empty, but she kept walking, whispering prayers along the way. When she finally saw the tall gates of the Royal Christian University, her eyes filled with tears. At the entrance, a guard stopped her. "Name?" he asked. She answered softly, "Daniel." The guard looked at her papers, nodded, and said, "Welcome, young man. May God guide your study." Her heart raced as she entered the great campus. The buildings were tall, and everywhere she looked, there were students in fine clothes. Some laughed, some carried golden books. She felt small and alone, but she remembered her prayer, "Lord, be my courage." From that day, Miriam lived as her brother. She prayed each morning in the chapel before class. At night, she studied by candlelight while others slept. She helped poor students who had no food and cared for anyone who was sick. Everyone respected her. They called her Daniel the Kind. Then one day, the whole school began to whisper. The king's son was coming to study there. His name was Prince Elias, a young man known for his wisdom and faith. When Miriam first saw him, he was kneeling in the chapel praying alone. The sunlight touched his face, and he looked peaceful, humble, and pure. Something moved inside her heart. She had never seen someone pray like that. It wasn't just his looks, it was his spirit. She whispered to herself, "He prays like the angels do." Days passed. The prince began to notice her too. He said kindly, "You pray with your heart, Daniel. You remind me of peace." Miriam smiled softly and replied. The months passed quickly at the Royal Christian University. Miriam, still known as Daniel, studied harder than anyone. She was kind, humble, and full of faith. Everyone loved her, and even the king's son, Prince Elias, saw something special in her heart. They became close friends. They studied, prayed, and spoke about God's goodness. The prince often said, "Daniel, you have something I cannot explain. Peace in your eyes." And Miriam would smile and say, "Peace comes when you walk with faith, Your Highness." But deep inside, she carried a heavy secret. She was living in truth before God, but a lie before the world. Every night she prayed, "Lord, let me finish this path with your strength." One dark night a storm came. The rain fell hard, the wind howled, and the river behind the school began to flood. Students screamed as the water rushed in. Without thinking, Miriam ran out into the storm. She pulled one boy from the flood, then another. The waves were strong, but she didn't stop. She prayed, "Lord, protect us." Then she saw a small child trapped near the riverbank. She jumped into the water without fear. "Daniel!" shouted Prince Elias, running after her. He grabbed her hand just before the current could take her away. As he pulled her to safety, her hat fell off, and her long dark hair flowed down her shoulders, shining in the rain. Everyone froze. The prince looked at her in shock. The truth was revealed. She was not Daniel. She was Miriam. She fell to her knees, crying in the mud. "I didn't want to lie," she said softly. "I only wanted to learn and serve God. My brother was sick, so I took his place." The prince knelt beside her, his voice calm and full of respect. "You risked your life for others," he said. "You did not sin. You showed faith greater than any rule." The next morning, the king called them to the palace. Everyone waited in silence as Miriam stood before the throne. She bowed her head and said, "Your Majesty, I broke the rule of men, but I followed the will of God. If I did wrong, forgive me." The king stood up and said, "My child, you have done no wrong. You have brought light to this kingdom. From this day forward, every girl will have the right to study and learn." The people cheered. Miriam cried tears of joy. Prince Elias smiled and whispered, "You changed the kingdom, Miriam." Years later, they stood together in the same chapel where they once prayed as students. The bells rang, and sunlight filled the room. Miriam wore a white dress, holding her mother's old Bible. Prince Elias stood beside her, smiling with love and pride. They were married quietly before the cross. Together they ruled with kindness and faith, building schools, helping the poor, and teaching that love and belief can change the world. Every night the queen knelt beside her husband and whispered, "Faith brought me here, and faith will guide me forever."